ExxonMobil, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, Marathon, BP America. Every one of them is a direct descendant of a single company that one man built in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1870. And the way he built it, the method he used to crush every competitor until he owned 90% of the American oil industry, is one of the most brilliant and ruthless moves in the history of business. His competitors were paying him money every time they shipped their own oil. They had no idea. This is the story of how it happened. The American oil industry in the 1860s was the closest thing to organized chaos that capitalism had ever produced. Thousands of wells drilled, oil flooding the market, prices crashing one month, spiking the next, fortunes made and lost in days. John D. Rockefeller looked at this chaos and saw something most people missed. The money wasn't in the drilling. The money was in the refining. Whoever controlled the refineries controlled the product. Whoever controlled the product controlled the price. Whoever controlled the price controlled everything. Rockefeller had kept a personal account book since he was 16 years old. He recorded every penny he earned, every penny he spent, every penny he gave to charity. He called it Ledger A. He believed with total conviction that God had given him the ability to make money and that it was his duty to make as much of it as possible and then give it away. In 1870, Rockefeller formed Standard Oil of Ohio with $1 million in starting capital. He was 30 years old, and he was about to do something that would change American capitalism forever. The key to understanding what Rockefeller did is understanding the railroads. In 1871, the three most powerful railroad companies in America, the Pennsylvania, the Erie, and the New York Central, had a problem. They were competing so fiercely with each other that freight rates were collapsing. They needed a guaranteed large customer who would commit to moving massive volumes in exchange for stable pricing. Rockefeller walked into that room with a proposition. Standard Oil would guarantee the railroads a fixed volume, 60 carloads of oil per day. In exchange, the railroads would give Standard Oil secret shipping discounts, called rebates, that no other refiner would receive. But that was only half of it. The railroads agreed to pay Rockefeller a percentage of what his competitors paid to ship their oil. Read that again. His competitors paid the railroad to ship their oil. The railroad took a cut of that payment and sent it directly to Rockefeller. Every barrel a competitor shipped made Standard Oil stronger and made the competitor weaker. It was a closed loop of capital that made independent competition mathematically impossible. The arrangement was called the South Improvement Company. It was secret. It was lethal. And by the time the independent oil men figured out what was happening, it was already too late. February 1872, Rockefeller began visiting his competitors, one by one, personally. He came without lawyers. He came without threats, at least not spoken ones. He came with numbers. The pitch was simple. Standard Oil was receiving shipping rates that no independent refiner could match. The competitor was losing money. Standard Oil would buy their refinery at what Rockefeller called a fair price. The alternative was to keep running, keep losing money, until the refinery went bankrupt anyway. Most sold. In 6 weeks, Rockefeller had acquired 22 of the 26 refineries operating in Cleveland. He had gone from controlling 10% of American oil refining to controlling a third. In 6 weeks, history called it the Cleveland Massacre. The men who built those refineries, who borrowed the money, who took the risk, who worked the machinery, had believed they were building something for themselves. They found out they were building it for Rockefeller. One of those men was Franklin Tarbell, an independent oil producer in Pennsylvania. His business partner couldn't take it. He died. Franklin Tarbell was forced to mortgage his home to survive. His daughter was 14 years old. Her name was Ida. She would remember. The Cleveland Massacre was only the beginning. Rockefeller moved city by city. Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York. The same method every time. The same offer. The same result. By 1879, just 7 years after the Cleveland Massacre, Standard Oil controlled 90% of all oil refining in America. In 1882, Rockefeller invented a new legal structure that had never existed before, the trust. 40 separate companies, operating across different states, all controlled by 9 trustees. with Rockefeller owning more than a third of the certificates. The Standard Oil Trust was valued at $70 million. It was the most powerful private corporation in the history of the United States, and it controlled the price of light for every home in America. Kerosene was how America lit its homes. Rockefeller controlled kerosene. That was the point. In 1901, a journalist named Ida Tarbell began investigating Standard Oil. She had access to sources inside the company. She had 30 years of personal fury, channeled into professional precision, and she had a story that the American public had never been allowed to know in full. Between November 1902 and May 1904, Tarbell published her investigation in 19 consecutive issues of McClure's magazine. She exposed the rebate scheme, the drawback payments, the Cleveland Massacre, the secret railroad agreements. The public responded with a fury that 30 years of newspaper coverage had never produced. Congress responded. The government responded. In 1911, the United States Supreme Court declared Standard Oil an unlawful monopoly under the Sherman Antitrust Act. It ordered Standard Oil broken into 34 independent companies. The sentence was supposed to destroy Rockefeller. It made him the richest man in the world. Rockefeller owned a quarter of the shares in each of the 34 new companies. As those companies grew and their share prices climbed, his personal wealth doubled. The court that broke up Standard Oil in 1911 to protect competition and punish Rockefeller had accidentally made him the wealthiest private individual in American history. ExxonMobil is a direct descendant of Standard Oil. So is Chevron, ConocoPhillips, Marathon, BP America. The combined market cap of Standard Oil's corporate descendants today exceeds $1 trillion. The company that the Supreme Court ordered destroyed in 1911 is worth more today than it was at the moment of its supposed destruction. John D. Rockefeller started with a ledger book and a refinery in Cleveland. He built it into an empire by making competition mathematically impossible and by making the competition pay for their own destruction without ever knowing it. He died in 1937 at 97 years old. He gave away more than half his fortune. He funded the University of Chicago, the Rockefeller Foundation, medical research that eradicated hookworm and contributed to the development of penicillin. The man who crushed 22 competitors in 6 weeks in Cleveland in 1872 also funded more beneficial medical research than any individual in history. Next, the private conversation in which Coco Chanel signed away her own fashion house to Nazi officers and got it back 30 years later through a deal that should not have been possible. Every week we go inside the rooms where dynasties were built and broken. Subscribe. The next room is already waiting.